The Crossroads Tavern had been boarded up for 37 years, its windows black as dead eyes, when Maria Santos first pressed her face against the cold glass. 8 months pregnant, kicked out by her family, abandoned by her boyfriend, she clutched the rusted key the lawyer had given her that morning. "Your grandmother's final gift," he'd said, though Maria had never even known the woman existed. The lock fought her at first, decades of rust and neglect making it stubborn. Maria's swollen belly pressed against the door as she wrestled with the key, her breath forming small clouds in the October chill. When the lock finally gave way with a grinding click, the door swung open on hinges that screamed like wounded animals. The smell hit her immediately: stale beer, cigarette smoke from another era, and something else, something that reminded her of lightning and rain-soaked earth. She stepped inside, one hand supporting her back, the other trailing along the wall until she found a light switch. Nothing happened when she flipped it. Grey afternoon light filtered through gaps in the boarded windows, illuminating a graveyard of furniture covered in dust sheets. Chairs sat stacked on tables like sleeping ghosts. The bar itself stretched along the far wall, a massive thing made of dark wood that seemed to absorb what little light reached it. Maria made her way carefully across the floor, wincing as broken glass crunched under her worn sneakers. Her baby kicked sharply against her ribs, making her pause and breathe through the sudden pressure. "I know, Mija," she whispered to her belly. "This isn't exactly the palace I promised you." She'd been living in her car for 3 days since her mother had thrown her out. "Bringing shame to our family," her mother had screamed. "Get out and don't come back until you learn some respect." The father, a smooth-talking bartender from the restaurant where she'd worked, had vanished the moment she told him about the pregnancy. Even her best friend Rosa had stopped returning her calls. The lawyer's phone call that morning had felt like a cruel joke. A grandmother she'd never heard of, dying alone in a nursing home, leaving her this place. "Esperanza Santos," the lawyer had said. "She specifically asked for you in her will, said you'd know what to do when the time came." Maria reached the bar and ran her fingers along its surface, feeling the deep grooves worn by countless elbows and spilled drinks. Despite the dust, the wood felt warm under her touch, almost alive. Her baby kicked again, harder this time, as if responding to something she couldn't sense. The pain in her lower back was getting worse. She needed to sit down, to rest, to figure out what she was going to do with a dead bar when she couldn't even afford food. Tears started to well up in her eyes, the weight of her loneliness pressing down like a physical thing. "Please," she whispered to the empty room, her voice cracking. "Just give me something, anything." The temperature in the room shifted, growing warmer. Behind the bar, an old jukebox that had been silent for decades began to hum with electricity. Soft amber light spilled from its face, and with a gentle click, music started to play, something old and jazzy, full of hope despite its minor key. Maria stepped back, her heart hammering. As she watched, hairline cracks in several whiskey bottles began to seal themselves, the glass knitting together like healing wounds. The shattered remains of a mirror behind the bar started to reform, pieces floating upward to rejoin the whole, until it reflected her stunned face with crystalline clarity. The overhead lights flickered once, twice, then blazed to life, revealing a tavern that looked decades younger than it had moments before. The dust was gone from the bar, the floor swept clean. Even the air smelled different, fresh and welcoming instead of stale and forgotten. Her baby was moving constantly now, not kicking but something gentler, like dancing. Maria pressed both hands to her belly, feeling a strange warmth spreading from her womb through her entire body. In the mirror behind the bar, just for a moment, she could have sworn she saw golden light emanating from her silhouette. Then, everything went still. The jukebox continued playing its sweet, melancholy tune. The lights remained on, but the magical transformation had stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving Maria alone, with her racing heart and 1,000 questions. She sank onto a bar stool, her legs suddenly weak. Outside, she heard the sound of footsteps on pavement, the first signs of life she'd noticed in this forgotten corner of the city. Through the windows, she glimpsed shadows moving with purpose, as if word was already spreading that something had changed at the Crossroads Tavern. Maria Santos had come here with nothing but desperation and a key to nowhere. Now she sat in what felt like a miracle, carrying a child who seemed to respond to magic itself in a place that defied everything she thought she knew about the world. The brass key felt impossibly heavy in Maya's palm as she stood before the weathered oak door. 3 days had passed since the lawyer's visit, 3 days of sleepless nights wondering if this was some elaborate, cruel joke. But here she was, her few possessions crammed into a torn backpack, staring at what might be her only chance at a real home. The lock turned with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting for her touch. The door swung open with a prolonged creak, releasing a rush of stale air that carried scents of old wood, forgotten dreams, and something else. Something that made the baby flutter restlessly in her womb. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light, filtering through grimy windows. The main room stretched before her, larger than she'd expected, filled with overturned chairs and tables draped in cobwebs. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth cold and dark. Behind the bar, bottles of various shapes and sizes lined shelves like sleeping sentinels, their contents long since evaporated or turned to vinegar. Maya stepped inside, her footsteps echoing hollowly on the wooden floor. Each step seemed to awaken something dormant in the building's bones. The floorboards groaned not in protest, but in recognition, as if the tavern itself was stirring from a long slumber. She set her backpack down carefully and moved toward the bar. The wood was solid oak, scarred but beautiful, with intricate carvings along its edge that seemed to shift and move in her peripheral vision. When she looked directly at them, they appeared to be simple Celtic knots, but when she glanced away, she could swear she saw wings. The baby kicked sharply, making her gasp and place both hands on her rounded belly. "Easy there," she whispered. "I know it's different from the shelter, but maybe different is what we need." A sudden crash from upstairs made her heart leap into her throat. Maya grabbed a poker from beside the fireplace, though she wasn't sure what good it would do against an intruder. The metal felt warm in her grip, almost alive, and for a moment she thought she heard the faint sound of bells chiming. "Hello?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is someone there?" Silence answered her, but it wasn't the empty silence of an abandoned building. It was the charged quiet before a storm, heavy with possibility and danger in equal measure. Maya climbed the narrow staircase, each step protesting under her weight. The second floor held a small apartment, a bedroom, kitchenette, and bathroom that, while dated, appeared functional. Everything was covered in the same thick dust, but beneath it she could see the bones of a cozy home. In the bedroom, she found the source of the crash. A framed photograph had fallen from the dresser, its glass shattered across the floor. Maya knelt carefully and picked up the frame. The photograph showed a woman about her own age, with striking silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold starlight. She was standing behind the bar downstairs, smiling at someone beyond the camera's view. On the back, someone had written in faded ink, "Elena Thorne, 1987, last of the Guardians." A chill ran down Maya's spine. Thorne, the same surname the lawyer had mentioned. But that was impossible. The woman in the photograph looked far too young to be her grandmother, more like a sister, if anything. The baby moved again, more insistently this time, and Maya felt a strange tingling in her fingertips, where they touched the photograph. For just a moment, she could have sworn she heard whispered words in a language she didn't recognize, syllables that seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly to her soul. She set the photograph carefully on the dresser and turned to survey her new domain. It would take weeks to clean properly, months to restore the tavern to working condition. She had no money for renovations, no experience running a business, and a baby due in less than 3 months. By any rational measure, this was madness. But as she stood there in the fading light, something settled in her chest, a sense of rightness she hadn't felt since learning she was pregnant. This place needed her as much as she needed it, maybe more. Maya made her way back downstairs and began the overwhelming task of making the space habitable. As she worked, cleaning decades of neglect from tables and chairs, she found herself humming a lullaby she couldn't remember learning. The melody seemed to resonate through the building, and gradually the oppressive atmosphere began to lift. By evening, she had managed to clear a small area near the fireplace and get the electricity working. As she lit her first fire in the massive hearth, shadows danced across the walls, and for a moment Maya could almost see the tavern as it once was, warm and welcoming, filled with laughter and the quiet conversations of those seeking refuge from the world's harsh edges. She settled into an old armchair she'd dragged near the fire, one hand resting on her belly, and began to plan. The keys felt impossibly heavy in Maya's palm as she stood before the tavern's weathered door. 3 days had passed since the lawyer's visit, 3 days of sleeping rough while wrestling with the decision. The baby had been restless, as if sensing her turmoil, tiny limbs pressing against her ribs with unusual force. She'd returned to the building twice, circling it like a wary animal. Each time, something had drawn her back. Not hope, exactly, but a strange pull she couldn't name. The neighborhood watched her with curious eyes, whispers following in her wake about the pregnant woman who'd inherited old Murphy's place. The lock turned easier than it should have after 30 years. The door swung open with a groan that seemed to echo from the building's bones, releasing air that tasted of dust and forgotten dreams. Maya stepped inside, one hand instinctively protective over her belly. Afternoon light filtered through grimy windows, illuminating a space caught between decay and possibility. The main room stretched before her, filled with overturned chairs and tables draped in cobwebs. A massive bar dominated the far wall, its dark wood scarred but solid. Behind it, bottles stood like forgotten sentries, their contents long since evaporated into crystalline residue. As Maya moved deeper into the space, her footsteps stirred motes of dust that danced in the amber light. There was something almost alive about the way they moved, swirling in patterns that seemed too deliberate for mere air currents. She paused, watching them spiral upward toward the tin ceiling, and felt the baby shift again, not restlessly this time, but as if settling into place. The silence wasn't complete. Beneath it, Maya could hear the building breathing, timbers settling, pipes humming with phantom pressure, the whisper of wind through gaps in the mortar. She'd lived in enough abandoned places to know the difference between empty and waiting. This place was definitely waiting. Behind the bar, she discovered a narrow staircase leading to what must have been living quarters. Each step protested under her weight but held firm. The upper floor revealed a small apartment, bedroom, kitchen, and bathroom arranged with practical efficiency. Everything was coated in the same thick dust, but the bones were good. Solid walls, working plumbing if the pipes weren't frozen, and windows that faced east toward the morning sun. Maya sank into a chair at the kitchen table, overwhelmed by the scope of what lay before her. The lawyer had mentioned some money, enough for basic repairs and supplies to get started, but this felt impossibly large, impossibly complex for someone who'd been surviving day to day for months. She closed her eyes and pressed both hands to her stomach. "What do you think, little one? Are we crazy to even consider this?" The response was immediate and startling, a flutter of movement that felt almost like agreement, followed by a warmth that spread from her core outward. Maya's eyes snapped open. The baby had been active before, but this felt different, purposeful. As she sat in the gathering dusk, memories surfaced of the dreams that had been haunting her sleep. Fragments of images, the tavern filled with warm light and laughter, faces she didn't recognize but somehow knew, and always that sense of sanctuary, safe harbor for those who had nowhere else to go. Maya had been one of those people for so long, she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to have choices. But sitting here in this forgotten place, she could almost see it, not as it was, but as it could be. The bar restored to gleaming warmth, tables filled with people who understood what it meant to need shelter, a kitchen that smelled of hope instead of decay. The sound of footsteps on the stairs below made her freeze. She'd locked the door behind her, hadn't she? Maya held her breath, listening as someone, or something, moved through the main room below. The footsteps were measured, deliberate, circling the space as if conducting an inspection. She crept to the top of the stairs, peering down into the growing shadows. A figure stood in the center of the room, tall and still. Even in the dim light, Maya could see he was well dressed, out of place in the dusty tavern. When he turned toward the stairs, his eyes caught what little light remained and seemed to hold it. "Hello, Maya." His voice carried easily up the stairwell, warm and somehow familiar. "I've been waiting for you to come home." The word home hit her like a physical blow. Maya gripped the banister, her heart hammering. She should run. Every instinct screamed danger. But the baby had gone completely still, and that strange warmth was spreading through her again, stronger now. "Who are you?" she called down, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "A friend," he replied, stepping closer to the stairs. "Someone who knew your grandmother very well. We have much to discuss." Maya's breath caught. The lawyer had mentioned no living relatives, no one who had known Eleanor Murphy, yet something in the stranger's manner suggested truth, and the baby's stillness felt less like fear than like recognition. The morning light filtering through the grimy windows revealed the true extent of the tavern's decay. Sarah stood in what had once been the main room, her hand resting on her growing belly as she surveyed the warped floorboards, water-stained walls and cobwebs thick as curtains. The musty air carried hints of something else, something that made her skin prickle with an awareness she couldn't name. She'd spent the night curled on the least mouldy cushion she could find, using her jacket as a blanket. It wasn't much worse than some of the places she'd slept over the past months, but the dreams had been different here, vivid, strange. She'd seen wings of silver light and heard voices speaking in languages that somehow felt familiar. The baby kicked, a sharp jab against her ribs that made her gasp. At 7 months, the movements were becoming more insistent, more purposeful. Sometimes she swore the baby was responding to things she couldn't see or hear. "Well, little one," she whispered, running her palm over her belly, "looks like this is home now. What do you think we should tackle first?" As if in answer, a section of rotted wood near the bar suddenly gave way with a wet, tearing sound. Sarah jumped back as chunks of ceiling plaster rained down, revealing blackened beams above. In the newfound gap, something glinted. Standing on an overturned crate she'd found in the corner, Sarah reached into the cavity and pulled out a small wooden box, its surface carved with symbols that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. The wood felt warm against her palms, almost alive. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth that showed no signs of age, despite the decades of abandonment, lay a leather-bound journal and a silver pendant on a delicate chain. The pendant bore the same flowing symbols as the box, but these seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. Sarah opened the journal with trembling fingers. The first entry was dated 47 years ago, written in elegant script that belonged to someone named Elena Vasquez. "The dreams are getting stronger. Marcus thinks I'm losing my mind, but I know what I saw. The child I carry is not entirely human. The visions show me a great war in heaven, angels cast down, their essence scattered. Some fragments found their way into mortal bloodlines, sleeping for generations until the stars aligned properly for their return. And I know how it sounds, but when I touch my belly, I feel wings." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Her own hand moved instinctively to her stomach, where the baby was now completely still, as if listening. "The old woman who sold us this place warned me about the curse, but I think she misunderstood. It's not the building that's cursed, it's us, the bloodline. We're meant to be guardians, protectors of something precious. The tavern is just the anchor point, the place where heaven's light can safely touch earth. But there are others who know, others who hunt for what we carry." The journal entries continued, becoming increasingly frantic. Elena wrote of men in dark coats watching the tavern, of whispers in the wind that spoke of prophecies and coming storms. The final entry made Sarah's hands shake so violently she nearly dropped the book. They found us. Marcus is dead. I can hear them breaking down the door. The baby. I can feel him trying to be born, but it's too early, too dangerous. I've hidden this record and sealed the tavern. If someone of the bloodline ever returns, they'll need to know the truth. The child must be born when the winter stars reach their apex. Only then will Heaven's guardian be strong enough to survive what's coming. If you're reading this, then the bloodline endures. Protect the child, rebuild the sanctuary, and whatever you do, don't let them find you before the birth. Sarah sank onto the crate, the journal clutched against her chest. The due date the clinic had given her was December 21st, the winter solstice, when the stars would indeed reach their apex. Less than 2 months away. The pendant in her other hand grew warmer, its light brighter. As she lifted it to examine the symbols more closely, they rearranged themselves into words she could suddenly read: Haven's Rest, Sanctuary of the Lost. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose shutters with a sound like whispered warnings. Sarah fastened the pendant around her neck, tucking it beneath her shirt, where it lay against her skin like a gentle flame. The baby kicked again, but this time it felt less like restlessness and more like recognition. She looked around the ruined tavern with new eyes. Not just a building, but a sacred space, a place where broken people could find shelter, where something precious could grow safely until it was ready to face the world. Haven's Rest, she said aloud, testing the name. It felt right. Somewhere in the walls, she could swear she heard the echo of beating wings. The morning brought visitors. Maya woke to the sound of hushed voices drifting through the broken windows of the tavern. She'd grown accustomed to the building's creaks and sighs, but these sounds were different. Human voices, deliberate and careful. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, where the baby had been unusually active since yesterday's encounter with the glowing woman. Peering through a gap in the boarded window, Maya spotted 3 figures standing in the overgrown courtyard, 2 women and a man, all dressed in simple but clean clothing that seemed somehow timeless. They weren't looking at the building like curious passers-by or potential buyers. They were studying it like they knew exactly what they'd find. The older woman, silver-haired and graceful despite her years, stepped forward and called out in a voice that carried the weight of ancient authority. "We know you're in there, child. We've come to help." Maya's breath caught. After months of invisibility on the streets, being seen felt both terrifying and oddly comforting. She made her way to the front door, each step deliberate as she considered her options. Running wasn't realistic anymore. She was too far along for quick escapes. She opened the door just enough to peer out. "Who are you?" The silver-haired woman smiled, and Maya felt an inexplicable warmth wash over her.
My name is Lydia. These are my companions, Marcus and Senna. We're part of an old order, guardians of places like this."
She gestured to the tavern with reverence. "We've been waiting a long time for someone to inherit the Crossroads." The Crossroads? That's what this place was called, long ago. A meeting point between worlds, a sanctuary for those caught between realms. Lydia's eyes moved to Maya's stomach with knowing gentleness, and for those carrying precious cargo. The baby kicked hard against Maya's ribs, as if responding to the woman's words. Maya winced, one hand supporting her back. "I don't understand any of this. I inherited the building, but I don't know anything about guardians or realms or—" "May we come in?" Marcus asked, speaking for the first time. He was younger than Lydia, but carried himself with similar quiet authority. "There's much to explain, and these matters are better discussed away from prying eyes." Maya hesitated, every survival instinct screaming caution. But the baby's movements had settled into something almost like contentment, and she found herself trusting that response. She stepped aside, allowing them entry. Inside, the 3 visitors surveyed the space with expressions of both sadness and hope. Senna, a dark-haired woman who appeared to be Maya's age, ran her fingers along the ancient bar top. "The energy is still here, dormant but present. The sanctification held even after all these years." "What sanctification?" Maya asked, settling carefully into the one chair she'd found that didn't threaten to collapse. Lydia approached slowly, her movements designed not to startle. This building was blessed centuries ago as neutral ground, a place where beings from different realms could meet safely, where the wounded could heal, where the lost could find their way. Her eyes met Maya's directly. Your bloodline has a connection to the original blessing. That's why you could claim it. I don't know anything about my bloodline. I grew up in foster care. That was likely for protection, Marcus said gently. There are forces that would have sought to eliminate your family line if they'd known it survived. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the tavern's broken windows. Eliminate? Senna moved closer, her expression earnest. The child you carry, they're special, Maya. The bloodline carries genetic memory of the first guardians, beings who served as bridges between heaven and earth. That connection was thought lost forever. The baby kicked again, and Maya gasped as a wave of warmth spread through her chest. For a moment she could have sworn she felt wings unfurling beneath her ribs, not painful, but powerful and protective. You felt that, didn't you? Lydia asked, noting Maya's expression. They're already developing their abilities. The birth will be significant. Significant how? Maya's voice came out smaller than she intended. Significant enough that both sides are mobilizing, Marcus said grimly. Those who want to protect the returning bloodline, and those who see it as a threat to the current order. Maya thought of the woman from yesterday, of her warning about darkness gathering. Someone came here yesterday. She said I was in danger. The three visitors exchanged meaningful looks. Describe her, Lydia requested. As Maya recounted the encounter, she watched their expressions grow increasingly grave. When she finished, Senna was the first to speak. Evangeline. She's complicated. Not an enemy, but not entirely trustworthy either. If she's taken an interest, things are moving faster than we hoped. What things? Lydia moved to the window, gazing out at the empty street. The return of the Guardian's child and the war that's coming because of it. The first customers arrived on a Tuesday morning, when the October rain drummed against the newly repaired windows. Maya had been scrubbing the bar top for the third time that week, her movements careful around her growing belly, when the door creaked open. A woman stepped inside, shaking water from a threadbare coat. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair escaping from a loosely braided knot and eyes that held the particular exhaustion Maya recognized in herself, the bone-deep weariness of having nowhere safe to rest. "Are you open?" the woman asked, her voice uncertain. Maya straightened, one hand instinctively moving to her stomach. Yes, we're open." The woman's gaze swept the interior, taking in the mismatched chairs Maya had salvaged from thrift stores, the simple menu chalked on a board behind the bar, and the soft light filtering through clean windows. Something in her shoulders relaxed. "Could I have some tea? And maybe—" She fumbled in her pocket, counting crumpled bills. "What can I get for $4? "Sit anywhere you like," Maya said, moving toward the small kitchen she'd carved out of what used to be a storage room. "Tea's coming right up." As she prepared a pot of chamomile, Maya found herself humming under her breath, an old lullaby her grandmother had sung, though she couldn't remember learning it. The melody seemed to fill the space, wrapping around both women like a gentle embrace. When she returned with the tea and a bowl of soup she'd made that morning, the woman was crying silently at a corner table. "I didn't order soup," the woman said, wiping her eyes. "It's on the house," Maya replied, setting down the bowl. "Everyone needs something warm when it's raining like this." The woman, Helen, she introduced herself, stayed for 3 hours. They talked about small things at first, the weather, the changing neighborhood, the challenge of finding decent, affordable food. But as the afternoon wore on, Helen's story emerged in careful pieces. A job lost to company downsizing, savings depleted during her husband's final illness, an eviction notice she couldn't fight. "I've been staying at the shelter," Helen said, stirring honey into her third cup of tea. "But you can only stay so many nights in a row before they make you leave for a week." "I've got 2 more nights then?" She shrugged. the gesture attempting lightness but failing. Maya felt something stir within her, not the baby, though the movement seemed connected to whatever was awakening in her chest. It was a warmth that spread outward, a certainty that felt both foreign and deeply familiar. "Helen," she said slowly, "how would you feel about helping me get this place fully running? I could use someone who knows their way around a kitchen, and there's a small apartment upstairs. It's not much, but it's warm and dry." Helen's spoon clattered against her cup. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Maya said, and realized it was true. Something about Helen felt safe in a way she couldn't explain, as if some inner compass was pointing her toward this moment, this choice. That evening, as Helen settled into the modest rooms above the tavern, Maya stood in the main room below and marveled at how different the space felt. Not empty anymore, but expectant, ready. The baby kicked, a sharp nudge against her ribs that made her gasp. As she placed her hand over the spot, she could have sworn she felt a flutter of wings beneath her palm. "What are you?" she whispered to her unborn child. "What are we becoming?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, but somehow not frightening. Whatever was happening to her, whatever strange inheritance she'd stumbled into, it felt right in a way nothing in her life ever had. Over the next few days, more people found their way to the Crossroads. A teenage boy who'd aged out of foster care and was sleeping rough. An elderly man whose disability checks barely covered rent or food, never both. A young mother fleeing something she wouldn't name, clutching a toddler who hadn't spoken since they'd arrived in the city. Each time someone crossed the threshold, Maya felt that same inner certainty. Without fully understanding why, she began offering more than just food and drink. The teenager Marcus proved gifted at carpentry and started helping with repairs in exchange for meals and a safe place to sleep in the basement. The elderly man, Frank, knew stories that kept the other patrons entranced for hours, and his presence seemed to ease some invisible tension Maya hadn't realized was building. Word spread in the way such things do among those who live on the margins, quietly, carefully, person to person. The Crossroads was safe, people whispered. The pregnant woman who ran it didn't ask questions or judge. She fed people who couldn't pay and somehow always had room for one more. What Maya didn't know was that the word was spreading in other circles too, carried on winds that touched neither earth nor heaven, reaching ears that had been listening for exactly this kind of disturbance in the careful order of things. The morning brought an unexpected visitor. Maya was scrubbing the last of the grime from the tavern's front windows when she spotted a woman in an expensive cream coat picking her way carefully across the debris-strewn lot. Everything about the stranger screamed money, from her perfectly styled silver hair to her Italian leather handbag, making her presence here all the more jarring. "Excuse me," the woman called out, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Are you the new owner?" Maya straightened, wiping her hands on the old shirt she'd been using as a cleaning rag. "Depends who's asking." The woman's lips curved into what might have been a smile on someone else, but on her seemed more like a calculated expression. "Victoria Ashford. I represent certain interested parties regarding this property." Something about the way she said "interested parties" made Maya's skin crawl. The baby stirred restlessly, and she found herself unconsciously placing a protective hand over her belly. "The tavern's not for sale," Maya said firmly. "Everything's for sale at the right price, dear." Victoria stepped closer, her heels clicking against the cracked pavement. "My clients are prepared to be quite generous, more generous than a woman in your circumstances should reasonably expect to encounter again." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable, and Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I said it's not for sale." Victoria's facade of politeness slipped slightly. "Perhaps you don't understand the gravity of your situation. This property has a history, a dangerous one. People have died here. Terrible things have happened. My clients are offering you a chance to walk away with enough money to start fresh somewhere safe. And if I refuse, then you'd be making a very unwise decision." Victoria's eyes seemed to glitter with an unnatural light. There are forces at work here that you couldn't possibly comprehend, forces that won't hesitate to eliminate obstacles. Maya's blood chilled, but she forced herself to stand straighter. Is that a threat? It's a warning, from someone who knows what's coming. Victoria reached into her purse and withdrew a business card, extending it toward Maya. When you change your mind, and you will, call that number. But don't wait too long. My client's patience isn't infinite. Maya didn't take the card. Instead, she stepped back toward the tavern's entrance, never taking her eyes off Victoria. Get off my property! For a moment, something flickered across Victoria's features, surprise perhaps, or frustration. Then the mask slipped back into place. She dropped the card onto the ground and turned to leave, but paused after a few steps. One more thing, she said without turning around. That baby you're carrying? It's not what you think it is. When the time comes, you'll remember this conversation. Maya watched until Victoria disappeared around the corner, then quickly ducked inside the tavern, her heart hammering against her ribs. The baby was moving more actively now, almost aggressively, as if responding to the encounter. She tried to focus on her work, but Victoria's words kept echoing in her mind. The woman had known about the pregnancy, had known something about it. The way she'd spoken suggested knowledge that went beyond mere observation. By afternoon, Maya had managed to get most of the main room cleaned, though the effort left her exhausted. She was sitting on one of the salvaged bar stools, catching her breath, when she heard footsteps on the front porch. This time, it was Father Marcus, carrying a paper bag that smelled wonderfully of fresh bread. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, though his usual warm smile seemed strained. "Someone came by this morning," Maya said without preamble. "A woman named Victoria Ashford. She wanted to buy the tavern." Father Marcus froze in the process of unpacking sandwiches. "What did you tell her?" "That it wasn't for sale." "But Marcus, she knew about the baby, and she said things." Maya shivered. "She said my baby isn't what I think it is." The priest was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands stilling on the paper bag. When he finally looked up, his expression was grave. "Maya, there's something I need to tell you. Something I probably should have shared before now." He sank onto the stool beside her. "Your grandmother didn't just own this tavern, she was its guardian. And now that responsibility has passed to you, guardian of a threshold, a place where the mortal world touches something much larger." Father Marcus's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "The child you carry. It's been chosen for something extraordinary, but that means there are those who will try to stop it from being born." Maya felt the room spinning around her. "You're talking about angels and demons like they're real." "Because they are," Father Marcus said simply, "and they're both coming for your baby." The morning brought an unexpected visitor. Maya was scrubbing dried blood from the floorboards where the shadow creature had fallen when she heard the gentle chime of the tavern's door. She looked up to find a woman standing in the doorway, her silver hair catching the early sunlight like spun moonbeams. Despite her aged appearance, she moved with the fluid grace of someone much younger. "You must be Maya," the woman said, her voice carrying an accent that seemed to shift between languages. "I am Serafina. I've come to help." Maya straightened slowly, one hand instinctively moving to her rounded belly. After last night's attack, she wasn't taking any chances. "Help with what, exactly?" Serafina stepped inside, and Maya felt the air shimmer around her, warm and comforting like a mother's embrace, with preparing for what's coming. "The child you carry has awakened something ancient, something that's been sleeping for far too long." "Everyone keeps talking about my baby like it's some kind of weapon," Maya said, exhaustion weighing down her words. "I just want to keep it safe." "And you will." Serafina moved closer, her eyes, an impossible shade of gold, studying Maya with surprising gentleness. "But safety requires knowledge." "May I?" She gestured toward Maya's belly. Against every instinct that had kept her alive on the streets, Maya nodded. When Serafina placed her palm against her stomach, warmth spread through Maya's entire body. The constant ache in her back disappeared, the morning nausea that had been plaguing her vanished, and for the first time in months she felt completely at peace. "Strong," Serafina murmured, wonder threading through her voice. "So very strong. This child will be born with wings of light, Maya. The first of its kind in over 1,000 years. Wings?" Maya's hand covered Serafina's. "What does that mean?" "It means hope." Serafina pulled back, but the warmth lingered. Guardian angels were cast out of heaven long ago, their bloodlines scattered and diluted through generations. But occasionally, very rarely, the divine spark reasserts itself. Your child is that spark. Maya sank into one of the tavern's rebuilt chairs, overwhelmed. "I don't understand any of this. A week ago, my biggest worry was finding enough food for the day. Now I'm supposed to believe I'm carrying some kind of angel?" "Not some kind of angel, the angel. The one prophesied to bridge the gap between heaven and earth, to heal the wounds that have festered for centuries." Serafina took the chair across from her. "But there are those who view this not as a blessing, but as a threat, like those shadow things that attacked last night." "The fallen, yes. They've been hunting for signs of the guardian bloodline for decades. They see your child as competition, a threat to the power they've built in heaven's absence." Serafina's expression darkened. "But they are not your only concern. Heaven itself is divided. Some see the return of the guardians as salvation, others view it as rebellion." Maya felt the baby shift inside her, a gentle flutter that somehow seemed reassuring. "What am I supposed to do? I can't fight angels and demons, I'm just—" "You're the mother of a miracle," Serafina interrupted firmly. "Never diminish that. But you're right that you need allies." She reached into a leather satchel Maya hadn't noticed before and withdrew a pendant on a silver chain. "This will help mask your child's presence from those who would do harm. Wear it always." The pendant was warm to the touch, carved from what looked like opal but shifted between colors Maya had no names for. The moment she clasped it around her neck, she felt a subtle shift, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. "There's something else," Serafina continued. "This tavern, the one you inherited, it's no coincidence. It was built on sacred ground, a place where the veil between worlds is thin. Your great-aunt knew what she was doing when she left it to you." "My great-aunt?" Maya frowned. "I never had a great-aunt. The lawyer said there must have been some mistake with the paperwork." Serafina smiled sadly. "Elizabeth was a guardian too, though she never had children. She spent her life maintaining the protections around this place, waiting for the bloodline to resurface. She recognized your child's presence even before you knew you were pregnant." Maya's mind reeled. Everything she thought she knew about her situation was shifting, revealing layers of purpose and destiny she'd never imagined. Why didn't she contact me? If she knew... Because knowledge is dangerous. The fallen have ways of extracting information, even from the innocent. She could only watch and hope. Serafina stood, smoothing down her simple grey dress. "But now her vigil is over, and yours has begun." "I don't know how to do this," Maya whispered. "You don't have to know. You just have to trust." Serafina moved toward the door, then paused. "Others will come, Maya. Some to help, some to harm. Learn to tell the difference quickly." The morning light filtered through the tavern's newly repaired windows, casting golden rectangles across the worn wooden floor. Maya pressed her hand against her growing belly, feeling the familiar flutter of movement within. 6 months along now, and the child seemed to respond to everything, the clink of glasses, the murmur of voices, even the subtle hum of energy that had begun emanating from the walls themselves. She'd grown accustomed to the strange warmth that radiated from certain spots in the building, particularly near the back room where she'd found the hidden journal. Thomas had explained it as residual angelic energy, remnants of her bloodline awakening in response to the pregnancy. What he hadn't mentioned was how it would affect the people who sought refuge here. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya looked up to see Detective Sarah Chen entering with a man she didn't recognize. He moved with careful precision, his dark coat immaculate despite the October chill outside. Something about his presence made the air feel heavier, charged with an electricity that set Maya's teeth on edge. "Maya," Sarah said, her voice carrying a warning note. "This is Gabriel Thorne. He's been asking questions about you and the tavern." Gabriel stepped forward, offering a slight bow that seemed both respectful and somehow mocking. "Ms. Rivera, I've heard remarkable things about what you've accomplished here." His eyes swept the space, taking in the mismatched tables where 3 homeless veterans sat sharing breakfast, the small alcove where Mrs. Patterson read to 2 neighborhood children, the corner where someone had left a basket of donated clothes. "Just trying to help people," Maya said carefully. The baby kicked, sharp and insistent, as if sensing her unease. "Help? Yes, I can see that." Gabriel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual since you began your restoration? Perhaps changes in yourself? In the building?" Thomas emerged from the kitchen, tea towel in his hands, but Maya caught the way his posture shifted when he saw Gabriel. Recognition flickered between the 2 men, followed by something that looked like old animosity. "Thorne," Thomas said quietly. "Thomas Hartley. Still playing guardian to strays, I see." Gabriel's attention never left Maya, though this one is rather special, isn't she? "You need to leave," Thomas said, moving to stand beside Maya. She felt the warmth of protective energy radiating from him, subtle but unmistakable. "I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, there are concerns in certain circles about what's happening here. Unauthorized miracles have a way of upsetting the natural order." Gabriel reached into his coat and withdrew a small silver pendant. The moment it appeared, every piece of glass in the tavern began to vibrate with a low, musical hum. The baby's movements became frantic, and Maya gasped as a wave of heat rushed through her. Around the room, people looked up from their activities with expressions of confused alarm. The air itself seemed to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. "Fascinating," Gabriel murmured, watching Maya's reaction. "The bloodline is stronger than we anticipated. The child hasn't even been born yet, and already it's affecting reality in measurable ways." "Stop," Thomas commanded, but Gabriel held up his free hand. "I'm not doing anything harmful, merely testing." He tilted the pendant, and the vibrations intensified. "The question is, what exactly is growing inside you, Ms. Rivera? Angel, Nephilim, or something else entirely?" Maya felt power building within her, unfamiliar and overwhelming. The warmth that had been a gentle presence for weeks suddenly blazed like a furnace. Every piece of metal in the tavern began to glow with soft golden light. The cash register, the door handles, even the buttons on people's clothing. "Enough," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that hadn't been there moments before. The word resonated through the building's bones, and Gabriel stumbled backward as if struck. "Remarkable," he breathed, pocketing the pendant. The strange phenomena ceased immediately, leaving only the lingering scent of ozone and something like cinnamon. "You have no idea what you are, do you?" "I know I won't let you threaten these people," Maya replied, surprised by her own certainty. Gabriel straightened his coat, his expression shifting from scientific curiosity to something colder. "Ms. Rivera, there are forces gathering that you cannot comprehend. Some seek to protect what grows within you. Others," he glanced at Thomas, "others believe it represents an existential threat to the established order. The demonstration you just provided will only strengthen their resolve." He moved toward the door, then paused. "You should know that your little sanctuary won't remain hidden much longer. Word is spreading. Choose your allies carefully." After he left, the tavern felt strangely quiet, despite the presence of a dozen people. Sarah approached Maya with concerned eyes. "What the hell was that?" Maya looked down at her hands, which still tingled with residual energy. "I'm beginning to think," she said slowly, "that we're all about to find out." The morning light filtered through the tavern's newly installed stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden floors. Maya pressed her hand against her growing belly, feeling the gentle flutter that had become her constant companion. The baby seemed more active lately, as if responding to the energy that crackled through the building's ancient bones. Another sleepless night. Ezra's voice came from behind her, warm with concern. He'd taken to arriving earlier each day, though Maya suspected he never really left. The protective wards he'd woven around the property grew stronger with his presence. "She's restless," Maya said, then paused. She'd never referred to the baby with a specific gender before, but somehow she knew. "I can feel her dreams. They're bright, sometimes too bright." Ezra moved to stand beside her, his celestial nature more visible in the early morning hours when shadows danced between realms. The bloodline awakens gradually. "Your daughter's power will manifest long before her birth." The weight of his words settled over Maya like a familiar cloak. She'd stopped questioning the impossibility of her situation weeks ago. The tavern itself had taught her that reality was far more flexible than she'd ever imagined. A knock at the front door interrupted her thoughts. Through the glass, she could see Beth's familiar silhouette, but something was wrong. The social worker's usual confident posture had crumbled into something raw and desperate. Maya hurried to unlock the door, finding Beth with tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry to come so early. I didn't know where else to go." "Come in." Maya guided her to one of the mismatched chairs they'd arranged around small tables. The tavern had transformed over the past month from an empty shell into something resembling its intended purpose, a place of refuge. Beth's story spilled out in broken fragments. A teenage daughter, missing for 3 days, police reports filed and ignored, a system that had failed the very person who'd spent her career trying to fix it. "I help everyone else's children," Beth whispered, "but I couldn't protect my own." Maya felt a familiar stirring in her chest, the same sensation that had guided her to Marcus weeks ago when he'd stood on the bridge's edge. She placed her hand over Beth's, feeling warmth flow between them, not her own power, but something channeled through her from the growing life within. "Tell me about Sarah," Maya said quietly. As Beth spoke, describing her daughter's favorite places and feared spaces, Maya closed her eyes and let her consciousness expand. The ability had been growing stronger, this strange connection to the lost and broken. She could sense them across the city like beacons of pain calling out for sanctuary. Images flashed behind her eyelids, a young girl huddled in an abandoned warehouse, scared and hungry but alive. Older men with predatory smiles circling like vultures. Danger approaching fast. "I know where she is." Maya's eyes snapped open, startling Beth. "But we need to go now." Ezra was already reaching for his coat, his expression grim. "The warehouse district. I can feel the darkness gathering there too." They took Beth's car, navigating through morning traffic with increasing urgency. Maya directed them through streets she'd never seen before, following invisible threads that pulled her toward Sarah's location. The baby kicked vigorously, as if sensing the approaching confrontation. The warehouse stood like a monument to urban decay, its broken windows staring blindly at the street. Maya could feel the wrongness radiating from within, not just human evil, but something deeper, something that had noticed her growing abilities and sought to corrupt them. "Stay with the car," Ezra told Beth, but the social worker was already shaking her head. "She's my daughter." They entered together, moving through shadows that seemed to writhe with malevolent intent. Maya's hand pressed against her belly, feeling celestial energy building there like a storm about to break. The baby's movements had stopped, replaced by an almost electric stillness. They found Sarah on the second floor, tied to a chair in a room that reeked of desperation and worse things, but she wasn't alone. 3 figures stood around her, men whose eyes held no light, whose very presence made the air taste of ash and sulfur. "The mother arrives," one spoke, his voice like grinding stone. "We wondered when Heaven's little mistake would show herself." Maya stepped forward, feeling power coursing through her veins. "Let her go. Your fight is with me. Our fight is with what you carry." The leader's smile revealed teeth like broken glass. That child should never be born. The old bloodlines were severed for good reason. The battle began without warning, shadow clashing against light in ways that defied physical law. Maya felt herself becoming a conduit for something vast and ancient, her daughter's power flowing through her like liquid starlight. Ezra fought beside her, his true form blazing with celestial fire. When the darkness finally retreated, leaving only 3 piles of ash and the echo of frustrated screams, Maya collapsed to her knees. The baby kicked once, gently, as if to say she was fine. Sarah was free, crying in her mother's arms. But Maya knew this was only the beginning. They'd revealed themselves now. The real war was about to start. The first sign something was wrong came with the silence. Maya had grown accustomed to the tavern's gentle hum, the whisper of wind through ancient timbers, the soft creak of settling wood, even the barely audible flutter of unseen wings. But as she descended the stairs that morning, her hand trailing along the banister, she found herself moving through air thick with unnatural quiet. The main room stretched before her, dimmer than usual despite the morning light streaming through the windows. The golden warmth that had suffused the sanctuary for weeks seemed muted, as if someone had drawn gauze across the sun. Maya pressed a palm to her belly, feeling the familiar flutter of movement within, but even that sensation felt strangely distant. "Thomas?" Her voice echoed oddly in the space. No answer came. She made her way to the kitchen, each step feeling heavier than it should. The coffee Thomas usually prepared sat cold in the pot, a skin of cream congealing on its surface. His jacket hung on its usual hook, but something about the stillness of it made her stomach clench. A shadow moved past the window, too quick, too angular to be human. Maya's breath caught as she recognized the signs. They were coming. The forces Sister Catherine had warned her about, the ones that would see her child as either salvation or abomination. She had hoped for more time, a few more weeks of peace to strengthen whatever defenses the tavern could offer. The back door stood slightly ajar, and she approached it with growing dread. In the garden beyond, Thomas knelt among the herb beds, but his posture was wrong, too rigid, too still. As she stepped closer, she saw his eyes staring sightlessly ahead, his face slack with an expression she had never seen before. "Thomas?" She touched his shoulder, and he turned toward her with movements that reminded her of a marionette guided by clumsy hands. "He cannot hear you." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the garden with crystalline clarity. "He dreams now of better days." It seemed kinder. Maya spun, searching for the source of the voice, but found only empty air shimmering like heat waves. "Who are you? What do you want?" "I am Raziel, keeper of divine secrets." The air before her began to solidify, revealing a figure that hurt to look at directly, tall and androgynous, with features that seemed to shift between masculine and feminine, beautiful and terrible. Wings of silver light stretched behind the being, casting no shadow. "I have come to speak with you about the child you carry, another angel." Maya's hand moved protectively to her belly. "Here to tell me why my baby's dangerous? Here to offer you choice." Raziel's voice carried no warmth, but neither did it hold malice. The blood that runs through that child's veins carries power that was meant to be lost forever. The last of the guardian lineage, those who once stood watch between heaven and earth. Maya felt the baby stir within her, responding to the angel's presence. The movement was stronger now, more insistent, as if her child could sense the celestial energy radiating from their visitor. "The other angels want the child destroyed," she said. "It wasn't a question. Some do, others seek to claim it, to raise it according to heaven's will rather than human sentiment." Raziel moved closer, and Maya felt the temperature drop around them. "But I offer a third path, which is, surrender the child's divine nature willingly. Allow me to sever the connection to the guardian bloodline before birth. Your baby will live, will be healthy and whole, but will be human, only human. The power that makes it a target will be gone. Maya stared at the angel, processing the offer. Around them, the garden seemed to hold its breath. Even Thomas remained frozen in his supernatural slumber. And if I refuse, then the child will be born with abilities that will reshape the boundary between worlds. Heaven will not allow such power to exist unchecked. The war that follows will consume everything you have built here, this sanctuary, these people you've come to protect, the peace you've found. Raziel's expression remained impassive, but the choice is yours to make. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she sensed movement, not just her baby's restless stirring, but something else. A presence that felt ancient and warm, protective in a way that spoke of generations of guardianship. When she opened her eyes again, Raziel was watching her intently. How long do I have to decide? 3 days. When the new moon rises, I will return for your answer. The angel's form began to fade, becoming translucent. Choose wisely, Maya Chen. The fate of more than one child rests in your hands. As Raziel vanished, the garden's natural sounds returned in a rush. Thomas blinked and looked around in confusion, the supernatural sleep lifting from his features. Maya, what happened? I was just... He trailed off, seeing her face. What's wrong? She helped him to his feet, her mind already racing through impossible choices. The morning sun cast long shadows across the tavern's main floor as Maya surveyed the damage from the previous night's attack. Broken glass glittered like fallen stars among overturned chairs, and scorch marks scarred the wooden walls where divine fire had met demonic shadow. Yet somehow, impossibly, the sanctuary held. Gabriel knelt beside the bar, his wounded wing folded awkwardly against his back as he traced protective runes into the floorboards with his fingertip. Each symbol flared briefly with golden light before settling into the wood grain, invisible but present. These should reinforce what we already have, he murmured, not looking up. But I won't lie to you, Maya. Last night was just the beginning. She pressed her hand to her swollen belly, feeling the familiar flutter of movement within. The baby had been restless since the attack, as if sensing the growing tension in the celestial realm above. Father Miguel emerged from the kitchen, carrying a steaming mug of tea, his weathered face creased with worry. The others are asking questions, he said quietly, setting the mug on an undamaged table. Mrs. Chen saw the lights from her apartment window. Tony's been circling the block all morning, trying to work up the courage to knock. Maya sank into a chair, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders like a lead cloak. In the weeks since she'd first stepped foot in this place, the tavern had become more than just shelter. It had become home to a growing family of broken souls seeking redemption. But how could she protect them when she barely understood the forces gathering around her unborn child? We could leave, she said, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. Find somewhere else, somewhere they wouldn't think to look. There is nowhere they won't look. Gabriel finally raised his eyes to meet hers, and she saw centuries of weariness reflected there. Besides, running would only delay the inevitable. Your daughter's destiny isn't tied to this place. This place is tied to her destiny. The kitchen door chimed as Sarah pushed through, carrying a plate of fresh bandages and a bottle of antiseptic. The young woman moved with quiet efficiency, her addiction battle giving way to a newfound sense of purpose. I've been thinking, she said, beginning to clean Gabriel's wing wound with gentle hands. If this place is supposed to be a sanctuary, maybe we're going about this all wrong. What do you mean? Maya asked. Sarah's fingers worked carefully around the singed feathers, her touch causing Gabriel to wince slightly. We're thinking like we're under siege, like we're just trying to survive until help arrives. But what if we're supposed to be the help? Before anyone could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the tavern. Maya's heart jumped, but Gabriel held up a calming hand. Not them, he said softly. I would sense it. Father Miguel moved to answer the door, revealing Tony's familiar silhouette framed against the morning light. The elderly man stepped inside cautiously, his eyes taking in the obvious signs of conflict. Behind him stood Mrs. Chen, her arms crossed but her expression concerned rather than hostile. "All right," Tony said, his voice gruff with emotion. "We want to know what's really going on here. And don't give us some story about electrical problems. Mrs. Chen's been around long enough to know the difference between a power surge and whatever the hell happened last night." Maya felt her carefully constructed normalcy crumbling around her. These people had become her chosen family, but how could she ask them to accept a truth that sounded like madness? She opened her mouth to deflect, to craft some plausible explanation, but Gabriel stood slowly, his damaged wings spreading wide despite the obvious pain. "The truth," he said simply, "is that Maya carries a child whose bloodline traces back to the first guardians of heaven. There are forces that would see that child destroyed, and forces that would see her protected. This tavern has become the battleground for that conflict." The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Tony's mouth worked soundlessly, while Mrs. Chen's sharp eyes moved from Gabriel's wing to Maya's pregnant form and back again. Finally, the older woman stepped forward, her weathered hands reaching out to touch one of Gabriel's damaged feathers. "My grandmother used to tell stories," she said quietly, "about spirits that walked among us, about children born with starlight in their veins. I thought they were just tales to help us sleep." She looked directly at Maya. "But you've been helping people, haven't you? Really helping them, in ways that don't make sense unless there's something divine at work here," Father Miguel finished, understanding dawning in his voice. Tony sank into a chair, running his hands through his thinning hair. "So what you're saying is, we're not just fighting for this neighborhood anymore. We're fighting for something bigger." Maya felt tears threaten as she looked around at these brave, broken people who had somehow found their way to her door. "I never wanted to drag you into this." Sarah finished bandaging Gabriel's wing and straightened, her young face set with determination. "Maybe we dragged ourselves into it. Maybe that's how sanctuary really works." The morning light felt different somehow, filtered through windows that seemed to glow with an inner warmth. Maya pressed her palm against her rounded belly, feeling the gentle flutter of movement within. 8 months now, and the child grew stronger each day, as did the strange energy that pulsed through the tavern's walls. She descended the stairs carefully, one hand trailing along the banister that had somehow repaired itself during the night. The sanctuary, as everyone had begun calling it, continued its miraculous transformation, healing itself in ways that defied explanation. Broken floorboards mended, cracked walls sealed, and the ancient hearth burned with flames that never seemed to consume the wood. In the main room, she found Marcus arranging chairs around tables that gleamed despite their obvious age. The war veteran moved with purpose now, his haunted eyes clearer than they'd been in months. The nightmares still came, he'd told her, but they felt distant, muffled by something he couldn't name. "Coffee's brewing," he said without looking up. "Elena brought fresh bread an hour ago, said she couldn't sleep, felt like she needed to be here." Maya nodded, understanding. They all felt it, the pull, the inexplicable need to gather within these walls. What had started as a handful of broken souls seeking shelter had grown into something resembling a family, or perhaps a congregation, though no one spoke of religion here. The front door chimed, and David entered carrying a toolbox. The carpenter had been coming daily for weeks, claiming there was always something that needed fixing, though Maya suspected he simply craved the peace the place offered. "Morning, Maya. That loose step on the back porch won't take but an hour to secure." He paused, studying her face. "You feeling all right? You look, I don't know, different today." She was about to respond when pain lanced through her abdomen, sharp and sudden. Maya gasped, doubling over as her water broke, pooling on the ancient wooden floor. "Marcus!" David dropped his tools, rushing to support her. The veteran was there instantly, his military training taking over. "We need to get her upstairs. Call Dr. Rodriguez." "No," Maya managed between contractions. Can't leave. Not safe." She couldn't explain how she knew, but every instinct screamed that leaving the sanctuary now would be catastrophic. The child was coming, and it needed to be born here, within these protected walls. As if summoned by her distress, the others began arriving. Elena burst through the door, her nurse's bag already in hand. Father Miguel appeared moments later, though he claimed no memory of deciding to visit. Sarah, the young mother, came with her toddler on her hip, drawn by the same inexplicable urgency. "Upstairs," Elena commanded, taking charge with professional efficiency. "David, Marcus, help her up." Sarah, watch Tommy and boil water. "Father, I don't care what your vows say about childbirth. We need all hands." The next hours blurred together in waves of pain and strange, otherworldly sensations. As Maya labored, the tavern itself seemed to respond. The walls hummed with energy, and shadows moved in corners where no one stood. The temperature remained perfectly comfortable despite the autumn chill outside, and the light streaming through windows took on an almost ethereal quality. Elena worked with steady hands, but Maya caught the wonder in her eyes. "I've delivered dozens of babies," the nurse whispered, "but this is different. Can you feel it?" Maya could. With each contraction, power surged through the building. The very air shimmered, and she glimpsed figures in her peripheral vision. Tall, luminous beings that vanished when she tried to focus on them. "They're here," she gasped between pushes. "The Guardians, they're protecting us." Through the windows, darkness gathered despite the early afternoon hour. Storm clouds that weren't quite natural swirled overhead, and shadows pressed against the glass like living things trying to force their way inside. But the sanctuary held firm, its walls blazing with gentle light that drove back whatever waited beyond. As the final stage of labor arrived, Maya felt her child's power fully for the first time. It rushed through her like sunlight, warm and pure and impossibly ancient. This wasn't just a baby being born, it was hope itself taking physical form. The lights flickered once, and in that moment between brightness and shadow, Maya saw them clearly. Angels filled the room, their wings spanning impossible distances, their faces radiant with joy and purpose. They stood guard as she brought forth the child they had waited centuries to protect. With a final push and a cry that seemed to shake the very foundations of reality, Maya's daughter entered the world. The baby's first breath drew in light itself, and her eyes, ancient and knowing beyond her moments of life, gazed up at her mother with recognition. Outside, the unnatural storm broke apart, retreating like an army that had lost its greatest battle. Inside the sanctuary, surrounded by friends who had become family and guardians who had never truly left, Maya held her miracle child and knew that everything had changed. The real fight was just beginning. The first contraction hit Maya like a thunderclap at dawn, doubling her over behind the bar as she reached for a bottle of whiskey. The amber liquid crashed to the floor, spreading in golden rivulets between the worn floorboards as she gripped the counter's edge, breathing through the pain that radiated from her core like wildfire. "Too early," she whispered to the empty tavern, though her body seemed to disagree. The baby had been restless for days, shifting and turning as if sensing the approaching storm that had nothing to do with the dark clouds gathering outside. Through the windows she could see them, figures in white robes moving between the trees, their forms flickering like candle flames in a breeze. Another contraction seized her, stronger this time, and the lights in the tavern flickered in response. The blessed salt line Marcus had helped her lay around the building glowed faintly blue, a protective barrier that had held for weeks against the increasing celestial visitors. But Maya could feel something different in the air tonight, a tension that made her skin crawl and her unborn child kick frantically against her ribs. She fumbled for her phone, speed-dialing Elena's number with shaking fingers. The midwife answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Maya? What's wrong?" "The baby's coming," Maya gasped, sliding down to sit on the floor behind the bar. "It's too early, Elena. Something's wrong." "How far apart are the contractions?" Maya started to answer when the tavern door exploded inward, the ancient wood splintering like matchsticks. 3 figures in pristine white robes stepped through the threshold, their faces hidden beneath deep hoods. The salt line hissed and sparked where they crossed it, but didn't stop them. The Nephilim child must not be born. The center figure spoke, its voice like breaking glass. The bloodline ends tonight. Maya dropped the phone, Elena's voice a distant buzz as she scrambled backward. The protective charms Marcus had given her felt cold against her skin, useless against these beings that moved with inhuman grace. Another contraction hit, and this time the entire building shook, dust raining from the rafters as the baby's power responded to her fear. "Stay back," she warned, though her voice came out weak and breathless. "This is sacred ground." The figures laughed, a sound like wind through a graveyard. "Sacred to whom? Your bloodline is an abomination, child. The guardian angels fell for a reason, and their legacy dies with you." The leftmost figure raised its hand, revealing flesh that glowed white-hot like molten metal. Maya closed her eyes, waiting for the end, when another voice cut through the tavern like a blade. "Touch her, and die." Marcus stood in the doorway, but he looked different. His usual casual clothes were replaced by armor that seemed forged from starlight itself, and massive wings stretched behind him, their feathers dark as midnight. Power radiated from him in waves that made the air shimmer. "Impossible," the center figure hissed. "You were cast out, stripped of rank and purpose." "My purpose," Marcus said, stepping into the tavern with measured steps, "was never to serve heaven's politics. It was to protect the innocent." His eyes found Maya's, and she saw centuries of pain and regret there. "I failed once. I won't fail again." The battle that erupted shook the very foundations of the tavern. White fire clashed against dark lightning as Marcus fought the 3 angels with a fury that spoke of personal vendettas and ancient grudges. Maya crawled behind an overturned table, her contractions coming faster now, each one accompanied by pulses of golden light that seemed to emanate from her belly. Through the chaos, she heard the rumble of an engine outside, followed by Elena's voice shouting her name. The midwife burst through the back entrance, medical bag in hand, her eyes widening at the supernatural battle raging in the main room. "We need to get you upstairs," Elena said, helping Maya to her feet. "Now." They made it halfway to the stairs when one of the white-robed figures broke away from the fight, diving toward them with claws extended. Maya raised her hands instinctively, and light poured from her palms, not her light, but the baby's, pure and blinding in its intensity. The angel shrieked and dissolved like mist in sunlight. "Holy hell," Elena breathed, then caught herself. "Sorry, probably not the right time for blasphemy." Despite everything, Maya almost smiled. Another contraction hit, the strongest yet, and she knew there was no more time for running or hiding. The baby was coming, celestial war or not, and every instinct she possessed told her that this child would be born in this tavern or not at all. "Help me to the back room," she told Elena, gripping the banister as Marcus's battle cry echoed through the building. "If heaven wants a fight, they can have one. But they're not stopping this birth." The golden light around her pulsed brighter, and somewhere in the distance she could swear she heard the sound of wings. The tavern's windows exploded inward as Seraphiel descended through the night sky, his 6 wings spread wide against the storm clouds that had gathered without warning. Maya pressed herself against the bar, one hand instinctively protecting her swollen belly as glass shattered around her feet like fallen stars. "You were warned." Seraphiel's voice resonated through the building, shaking the very foundations. His perfect face was terrible in its beauty, unmarked by compassion or doubt. "The abomination you carry threatens the natural order." Gabriel materialized between them, his own wings unfurled but smaller, somehow more earthbound than his brother's celestial magnificence. "She is under my protection, Seraphiel, as is the child." "Your protection?" Seraphiel's laugh was like breaking crystal. "You who fell from grace? You who chose mortality over duty?" His gaze shifted to Maya, and she felt the weight of eternity in those silver eyes. "Did he tell you what he truly is, woman? A deserter, a coward who abandoned his post when heaven needed him most. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, but she found her voice. I know what he is, and I know what you are. She stepped forward, her bare feet crunching on glass. You're afraid. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, the tavern's other inhabitants, Tom clutching his bottle, Sarah holding baby James, Marcus with his scarred hands raised defensively, watched in terrified silence. Afraid? Seraphil's wings flared wider. I am the sword of heaven. I know no fear. Then why are you here? Maya demanded, her voice growing stronger. If this child is such a threat, why not simply destroy us from afar? Why come yourself unless some part of you knows this is wrong? For a moment, uncertainty flickered across the Archangel's perfect features. In that instant, Maya saw something else, loneliness. Ancient, bone-deep loneliness that made her own years on the streets seem like a brief inconvenience. Gabriel took a step closer to his brother. She's right, Seraphil. You wouldn't be here if you were certain. You remember what we fought for once. Hope, redemption, the possibility of something better. Silence! Seraphil raised his hand, and divine fire danced between his fingers. I will not be swayed by sentiment or the desperate words of the fallen. His gaze fixed on Maya's belly, where the baby stirred restlessly. That child carries power that was never meant to exist. Angelic essence corrupted by mortal flesh. It will tear holes in reality itself, or heal them, whispered a new voice. They turned to see Father Vincent standing in the tavern's doorway, his priest's collar gleaming white in the supernatural light. But something was different about him, an otherworldly quality that hadn't been there before. Michael Gabriel's voice was barely audible. The old priest smiled sadly. Hello, brothers. As they watched, his form shimmered and expanded, revealing wings of pure white light and eyes like burning coals. I've been watching over this place for longer than you know. Seraphil staggered backward. The protector? But you were lost, cast down? Hidden, Michael corrected, waiting, preparing. He looked at Maya with infinite tenderness. Do you think heaven's greatest mystery would be left unguarded? This child, your child, represents something we've waited millennia to see. Maya felt tears streaming down her face. Father Vincent, you've been here all along. Every lost soul who found their way to your door, every moment of grace in this broken place, I was here to witness it. You've built something remarkable, Maya, a sanctuary where the impossible becomes possible. Michael's gaze shifted between his brothers, where even fallen angels might find redemption. Seraphil's divine fire flickered and died. The Council of Seven will never accept this. They sent me to... The Council of Seven, Michael interrupted, has forgotten what we were created to protect. Not divine purity, but the spark of the divine in all creation. This child will bridge two worlds, heal ancient wounds. As if summoned by their words, the baby kicked hard against Maya's ribs. Light poured from her skin, warm and golden, filling the tavern with a presence that was neither fully angelic nor human, but something entirely new, something hopeful. In that light, Seraphil's perfect composure finally cracked. His wings folded against his back as he sank to his knees among the broken glass. I have served faithfully for eons, he whispered. I have never questioned, never doubted, but this feels like the moment before creation itself. Gabriel knelt beside his brother, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Then perhaps it's time to stop being a sword and remember how to be a guardian. Outside, the storm clouds began to part, revealing stars that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the light emanating from Maya's womb. The child within her stirred again, and for the first time in months, Maya felt no fear, only anticipation for the miracle about to change everything. The real battle, she realized, wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The first contraction hit Mara as she was wiping down the bar counter, the cloth slipping from her fingers as pain radiated through her swollen belly. She gripped the mahogany edge, breathing through the sensation as the tavern's protective wards hummed with sudden intensity around her. "Too early," she whispered to the empty room, though at 36 weeks, the baby wouldn't be dangerously premature. Still, this wasn't how she'd imagined it would happen. She'd planned to have everything ready, to have Gabriel here beside her, not scattered across the city hunting down the remaining shadow seekers who'd been circling closer each night. The tavern's windows flared with golden light as another contraction seized her, stronger this time. The building itself seemed to pulse with her labor, the very foundations responding to the imminent arrival of the child who would either save or damn them all. Mara fumbled for her phone, calling Gabriel with shaking fingers. It went straight to voicemail. Of course it did. He was deep in the old subway tunnels with Marcus and Elena, tracking the last nest of creatures that had been drawn to the tavern like moths to flame. She tried Elena next, then Marcus. Nothing. They were beyond reach, and she was alone with a baby who apparently had decided that tonight was the night to make their entrance into a world balanced on the knife's edge, between salvation and apocalypse. The tavern's door chimed as someone entered, and Mara looked up hopefully, expecting to see one of her makeshift family returning early. Instead, she found herself staring at a woman she'd never seen before, tall and elegant with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold the depth of eternity. "You're in labor," the stranger said, not a question but a statement of fact. Mara straightened as much as she could, her hand moving protectively to her belly. "Who are you?" "My name is Seraphine. I'm here to help." The woman moved closer, and with each step, the tavern's wards seemed to recognize her, welcoming her presence rather than resisting it. "I know what you're thinking. You don't trust easily anymore, and you shouldn't. But your child is coming whether you trust me or not, and they need to be born safely." Another contraction gripped Mara, and this time she couldn't suppress the gasp of pain. When it passed, she found Seraphine beside her, supporting her weight with surprising gentleness. "You're one of them," Mara said, recognizing the otherworldly quality that marked celestial beings. "An angel." "I was, once, before the fall scattered us like leaves in a hurricane." Seraphine guided her toward the stairs. "Your bedroom will be safest. The wards are strongest there, and we'll need every protection we can get. The others are coming, aren't they? The ones who want to stop this." Seraphine's expression darkened. "They're already here, surrounding the building, waiting. They know as well as we do that once your child draws their first breath, everything changes. The old laws, the ancient compacts, the very structure of reality itself will shift to accommodate what they are." They reached Mara's bedroom just as another wave of pain crashed over her. She doubled over, breathing hard, and felt something wet between her legs. Her water had broken, soaking through her jeans and onto the hardwood floor. "That's it," Seraphine said, helping her onto the bed. "No going back now." Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows with unnatural force. Through the glass, Mara could see shapes moving in the darkness beyond the street lamps, figures that didn't quite look human, even from a distance. "How long do we have?" she asked through gritted teeth as another contraction built. "Until dawn. They can't breach the tavern's protections during daylight, but in darkness, with their numbers—" Seraphine trailed off, focusing on checking Mara's progress. "You're moving quickly. First babies usually take longer, but then again, nothing about this has been usual." The lights flickered as something struck the building's exterior walls. The wards held, but Mara could feel them straining against whatever was testing their strength outside. "Gabriel," she whispered, wishing desperately that he were here, that his presence could somehow make this safer, easier. "He's coming," Seraphine said, surprising her. "I can feel him in the city, racing back. But I don't know if he'll make it in time." Another contraction, stronger than the rest, and Mara felt the overwhelming urge to push. The baby was coming now, ready or not, protections in place or not, with half the celestial realm apparently gathered outside, wanting to prevent this birth from ever happening. "What happens if they get through?" Mara asked, gripping Seraphine's hand as the next wave of labor pains began. Seraphine's eyes met hers, ancient and sad and determined. Then we make sure they regret it. Your child isn't just any baby, Mara. They're the first new guardian angel born in 1,000 years. And I'll die before I let anyone harm them. The first contraction hit Sarah like lightning splitting the sky. She gripped the bar's polished edge, her knuckles white against the dark wood as the sensation rolled through her body with celestial intensity. The tavern's walls pulsed with golden light, responding to the life trying to emerge within her. "It's time," she whispered, though everyone already knew. The assembled guardians, Marcus with his weathered face etched in concern, Elena, whose healing hands already glowed with prepared energy, and Father Miguel, clutching his worn Bible, had felt the shift in the spiritual atmosphere hours ago. Outside, the storm that had been brewing for days finally broke. Rain lashed against the windows while thunder crashed overhead, but Sarah knew this was no ordinary tempest. The forces of heaven and hell were positioning themselves for the final confrontation, and her child was the prize they all sought. Another contraction seized her, stronger this time, and the tavern's protective barriers flared brilliant white. The sigils carved into the doorframe blazed like stars, holding back the darkness that pressed against the building from all sides. Through the storm-lashed windows, Sarah could see shadows moving, angels and demons alike, circling like vultures, waiting for the moment when the barriers would weaken. "The back room," Elena said, her voice steady despite the chaos building around them. "We need to get you somewhere more protected." Marcus helped Sarah stand, his strong arms supporting her as another wave of pain crashed through her body. With each contraction, she could feel her child's power growing stronger, reaching out toward something she couldn't quite comprehend. The baby's celestial nature was awakening, calling to its divine heritage even as it prepared to enter the mortal world. They made their way slowly through the tavern, past the tables where broken souls had found healing, past the bar where miracles had been served alongside simple drinks. The building groaned around them, its protective magic straining against the supernatural forces gathering outside. Sarah's water broke as they reached the back room, and with it came a pulse of pure divine energy that shattered every glass in the tavern. The demons outside shrieked in rage and pain, momentarily driven back by the wave of holy power. But Sarah knew it wouldn't hold them for long. As her labor progressed, the barriers would weaken, and when her child finally emerged, there would be a moment of vulnerability that their enemies would exploit. "They're coming," Father Miguel said grimly, peering through the curtained window. "I can see them massing at the edge of the property. The moment the child is born—" "I know," Sarah gasped between contractions. She could feel them too, a writhing mass of malevolent intent just beyond the tavern's defenses, fallen angels with wings like oil slicks and demons with eyes like burning coals, all hungry for the power her child represented. Elena knelt beside the makeshift bed they'd prepared, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she checked Sarah's progress. "Not much longer now," she murmured. "The baby's almost ready." As if responding to her words, the strongest contraction yet seized Sarah's body. She cried out, and the sound carried a note of divine music that made the tavern's walls ring like cathedral bells. The protective barriers flickered dangerously, their golden light stuttering as Sarah's strength was pulled inward, focused on the monumental task of bringing new life into the world. Outside, something massive struck the building. The impact sent tremors through the floor and caused dust to rain from the ceiling. The demons were testing the defenses, probing for weakness. Another strike followed, then another, each one more powerful than the last. "Hold on, Sarah," Marcus said, positioning himself at the window with a rifle that had been blessed by 3 different priests. "We've got you." But Sarah barely heard him. She was lost in the rhythm of labor, her consciousness split between the physical agony of birth and the spiritual battle raging around her child. She could feel the baby's soul, bright and pure and impossibly powerful, struggling to anchor itself in flesh and bone. This wasn't just birth, it was incarnation, the divine taking mortal form. The tavern's lights began to dim as the protective spells drew on every available source of power. The temperature dropped suddenly, frost forming on the windows despite the summer storm outside. Whatever was coming for them was getting closer, feeding on the growing chaos of the supernatural battle. Sarah felt the urge to push, overwhelming and undeniable. The baby was coming whether the world was ready or not. She bore down with everything she had, pouring her love and determination into this final effort, and felt something shift in the cosmic balance. The lights went out completely, plunging the tavern into darkness. In that moment of absolute vulnerability, with celestial power flowing freely and the barriers at their weakest point, Sarah heard the sound of splintering wood and knew their enemies had finally broken through. Her child was about to be born into a war zone, and everything they'd fought to protect hung in the balance. The first contraction hit Maya, as dawn painted the tavern's windows gold. She gripped the bar's edge, her knuckles white against the worn wood that had witnessed countless stories of love and loss. The gathered angels fell silent, their celestial presence dimming as if they too held their breath. "It's time," she whispered, and the words carried the weight of prophecy. Raphael moved to her side instantly, his healing light already beginning to emanate from his hands. "The child chooses this moment," he said, wonder threading through his voice. "As the boundary between night and day dissolves, so too does the veil between worlds." Michael stood guard at the door, his sword blazing with protective fire. Through the windows, Maya could see the fallen gathering in the pre-dawn darkness, their forms writhing with desperate hunger. They knew, as all of heaven and hell knew, that this birth would reshape the cosmic order. Another contraction seized her, stronger than the first. Maya cried out, and every glass in the tavern resonated with her pain, their crystal voices joining in an otherworldly chorus. The homeless souls who had made this place their sanctuary pressed close, offering their hands, their prayers, their broken hearts made whole by witnessing this miracle. "Tell me again," Maya gasped, as the contraction ebbed, "what this child will become." Gabriel's voice was soft as starlight, a bridge between the fallen and the risen. "Your daughter will carry the choice that was denied to us, the power to forgive even the most corrupted soul, to offer redemption to those who have lost their way." Outside, the fallen pressed closer. Their leader, once called Luciel the Light-Bearer, materialized in the doorway. His beauty remained, though twisted by eons of rage and despair. "You think to birth hope itself," he snarled, "but hope is cruelest of all torments. Let us end this charade before it begins." Michael raised his blade, but Maya lifted her hand. "Wait." Her voice carried an authority that surprised even her. "Let him speak. This child will be born into a world where both light and shadow exist. She must know the pain of both." Luciel's expression shifted, confusion flickering across his perfect features. "You would listen to me? I've lived on the streets," Maya said, another contraction building. "I know what it means to be cast out, forgotten, believed beyond saving. If this child is to offer redemption, shouldn't she understand what created the need for it?" The fallen angel stepped forward, and Maya saw past his terrible beauty to the wounded soul beneath. "I was the brightest," he whispered. "I carried the morning star and sang the first songs of creation. But I questioned, I doubted, and for that single moment of uncertainty, I was cast into endless night. And yet," Maya breathed through the pain, "you're still here, still fighting. That takes its own kind of faith." The contraction peaked, and with it came a sound like reality itself cracking open. Light poured from Maya's skin, not harsh and blinding, but warm as a mother's embrace. The tavern's walls seemed to expand, becoming vast as the space between stars. Raphael's hands guided her as she knelt, supported by arms both earthly and divine. The homeless woman who had first found Maya, Sarah, whose addiction had cost her everything, wept openly as she held Maya's hand. "You saved us all," she whispered, "just by believing we could be saved." The child came with the sunrise, born on a tide of light that washed over the assembled multitude. Angels and humans alike gasped as the baby's first cry rang out, not the wail of a newborn, but a note of pure music that seemed to heal every broken thing it touched. Maya cradled her daughter, this impossible child who bore wings of silver gossamer and eyes that held the wisdom of eternity. But more than her celestial heritage, the baby radiated something even more powerful, an unconditional love that made no distinction between the righteous and the fallen. Luciel fell to his knees as the child's gaze found his. "She sees me," he breathed, wonder breaking his voice. "Not what I became, but what I was meant to be." "What we're all meant to be," Maya corrected gently. She looked around the tavern, at the angels with their terrible beauty, at the homeless souls with their hard-won wisdom, at the fallen with their ancient pain. This is her congregation, the broken, the lost, the forgotten. And she'll teach us all that there's no such thing as too far gone. The baby's wings fluttered, catching the morning light. In that simple gesture, Maya saw the future. Not perfection, but endless possibility. Not the erasure of darkness, but the patient, persistent work of love transforming pain into purpose. The tavern had become what she'd always dreamed, a true sanctuary. And at its heart lay this child, this bridge between worlds, ready to begin the long, beautiful work of healing a fractured cosmos, one broken soul at a time. Outside, the city awakened to a day that would be subtly, irrevocably different. Hope had been born.